Welcome to the Real Estate Bee with your guide and as a trusted real estate expert, Daniela Gnecchi.
Hello and welcome. Today, we continue our journey through the different forms of rental in Spain, and we talk about medium-term rental. Medium-term rental, together with tourist rental, is the best form of investment that you can choose when you buy a property in Spain and you don't use it all the time. So watch this video until the end, because I will tell you how it works, who manages it, what return you may expect, what are the advantages, and what you should be careful about. I am Daniela Gnecchi and this is my channel, everything you need to know to successfully purchase a property in Spain as a foreigner. I invite you to go to my website, therealestatebee.com. You can subscribe to the newsletter. You can browse through a catalog of many new development properties. Remember, I can help you with almost all the new development properties in the Costa del Sol, Costa Blanca and Costa Calida. So if you are looking to invest in a property in Spain, contact me and together we can make sure that you have everything you need for a smooth and successful operation and a very profitable investment. What is medium-term rental? Medium-term rental is the intermediate form between long-term rental, which we discussed in the previous video, and tourist rental. It is a form of rental that has a duration that is between 32 days and 11 months. It's important that it never goes up to 1 year, because if it goes up to 1 year, it becomes long-term rental. And if it's less than 32 days, it is tourist rental. What is extremely important is that to differentiate medium-term rental from long-term rental, the tenant who lives in the property has their permanent address somewhere else. So they are only spending a few months in the property, but in no case ever it becomes their permanent residence. Medium-term rental is regulated by the same law that regulates long-term rental, the Ley de Arrendamiento Urbano. But unlike long-term rental, with medium-term rental, this law is not very strict. What is the target for medium-term rental? The target for medium-term rental, which is also something that the law regulates, are people who spend time in a property for a different type of activities, which can be professional, which can be recreational, cultural, teaching, holiday, basically someone who needs to spend a few months in a city for a specific reason. In medium-term rental, the owner signs a contract with the tenant, and this contract has to include all the specific clauses for the type of rental, which is, of course, the duration of the rental, the price, how the expenses, the utilities, for example, are managed, how the repairs are managed, how much is the deposit, and the possible reasons for the termination of the contract. How does it work in general? Usually for medium-term rental, the tenant pays a 2 months deposit, and usually the utilities, this depends on the agreement between the landlord and the tenant. The utilities are usually paid by the owner, meaning that the contract stays in the name of the owner. It is unthinkable to be able to change contracts account every 3, 4, 6 months. So the contract stays in the name of the landlord, but usually it is either included in the rent, or which is higher, or the tenant pays on top of the rent a provision of funds to cover the utilities, and then when the actual consumption is measured, at the end of the tenancy, the difference, if there is any difference, is taken by the deposit. This depends on the agreement between the two parties. Can this type of contract be extended? Yes, but not for more than 1 year. Be very careful. This is a very important point. What happened when the government introduced this absurd law on the long-term rental? It happened that around 40% of people who were renting out their properties shifted from long-term rental to medium-term rental. But what did they do? Some of them, they kind of hid the actual long-term contract under a medium-term contract, meaning that the contract with the same tenant was 11 months, and then it was extended by 11 months, 11 months, 11 months to become a several-year contract. This is not possible. This is not what medium-term rental is for. Be careful, because this is something that you cannot do. The same tenant cannot rent for more than 11 months. So the contract can be extended, but never for more than 1 year with the same person. On the other hand, can the tenant move out before the end of the tenancy? Yes, but again, it depends on the agreement, and according to what is in the contract, as a landlord, as an owner, you may be entitled to ask for compensation if a tenant moves out before the end of the tenancy. So what happens if you want to use the property, or if you want to sell the property when the property is rented out medium term? Well, here it is much easier than with long-term rental, because the longest the contract can be is 11 months. So even if you decide that you want to sell the property midway through the contract, you may have still 4, 5, 6 months in the worst case for the tenant to stay in the property. So you can either negotiate with the tenant, find them another medium-term place to stay, or you can put the property on the market, and it may be very likely that by the time the property is sold, the tenant is gone or about to go. Or you can sell the property with the tenant or with the medium-term rental business as an investment, because unlike long-term rental, medium-term rental is a very profitable investment, and it's much easier for you to find an investor interested in purchasing your property with a tenant in the property. Who manages medium-term rental? Usually an agency. One of the aspects of medium-term rental is that there is a very frequent turnover of tenants. So usually especially if you're not living in the country, or even if you're living in the country, you don't want to be bothered because it's much more work than with long-term rental, you delegate everything to an agency. There are two types of agencies. Agencies that only take care of finding the tenants for you, and then you have to take care of the rest, or agencies that take care of the full management of the rental and the property. I advise you to go for the latter, because in this case, you give them the keys and you even forget you have an apartment. You just receive the rent every month and you have no headaches. What do these agencies do? They take care of the advertisement of the property, of the due diligence of the tenants. Due diligence meaning that, for example, if they are students, they ask for guarantees to the parents. If they work, they check their company status, the pay slips, the work contract, and they take care of the inventory. They do a detailed inventory at the beginning of the tenancy with pictures, with all the dedicated list of what is in the property and its state. They do the same at the end of the tenancy, and if something is damaged, the compensation is taken from the deposit. They take care of the deposit. It must be deposited in a specific account. There are specific type of accounts managed by the the authorities for the rental deposits. They take care of getting the rent, getting paid the rent every month and transferring you the rent. They take care of the repairs. If there's something to repair in the property, if it's usual repair or something that breaks down that you have to replace, for example, the boiler, the washing machine or something like that, then you pay for it, but they take care of everything. If it's something that is due to a bad management, bad usage by the tenants, then they have to pay for it. They also take care, for example, of accessing the properties. If the tenant is at work during the day, for example, and someone must enter the property for an inspection of the alarm system, for example, the agency takes care of that too. So altogether is a full management of everything you may need when your property is rented. How much is the fee of the agencies that take care of medium-term rental? Usually, on average, is between 10 and 15%. So if it's more, it starts to be a bit expensive. So take into account that they do a lot, and usually this is what they ask as a fee, of course, only when the property is rented. What are the advantages of medium-term rental? Medium-term rental has several advantages. First of all, flexibility. You are free to use the property yourself for a part of the year and then rent it out when you are not using it. Of course, it's not as flexible as tourist rental, which is the most flexible form of rental, but still, you are free to decide to use the property for a few months or weeks and to rent it out for as long as you want while you are not using it. Second, control. You are much more in control of your property than you are with long-term rental, where you cannot even access your property often for years. With medium-term rental, between tenancies, you can always go check your property, you can change things if you want, and you are much more in control. This greater control reduces also the risk of important damage to your property, because if you check between tenancies and you see that something needs repair or needs improving, you can do it immediately without waiting long and without things getting worse. Also, you can adjust to the market demand. Let's say, for example, that you rent a property and you are renting it out to a certain target of people, and in the same area where you have your property, they open a new university, a new hospital, for example. There, you can immediately adjust to the market demand and start renting out to this new target of professionals. You also have flexibility on the prices. You can adjust the prices depending on the situation. For example, you can charge more if someone wants to rent for the 3 peak summer months, or you can, depending on the location of your property, you can adjust the prices between tenancies. Also, if prices are going up, you can, from one year to the next, slightly adjust the price. You have much more flexibility than with long-term rental, where you cannot change the price with the exception of the small adjustment to the inflation rate. Another very important advantage is higher profitability. Medium-term rental is much more profitable than long-term rental. It is hard to give you a precise idea because it always depends on the location of the property, the type, the people you are renting out to, but to give you a ballpark cost, an example, a property that long-term may be rented out for 1,000, 1,100 euros per month, medium-term can be rented out for 2,000 or even a bit more. So there is a lot of difference between long-term rental and medium-term rental in terms of profitability. Very, very, very important advantage. Less risk of the tenant not paying the rent and the tenant who decides to live in your property forever. Why? First of all, because there is a more turnover, a higher turnover of tenants. You can also select the tenants. You can say that you want to rent properties, for example, not to students. You want only to rent properties to professionals. You can already set a certain specific segment within the target of medium-term rental. The target of medium-term rental is usually professionals. Consider, for example, if your property is in an area where there are universities, medicine universities and hospitals, you are very likely to have medical students, to have people who are training in the hospital, to have doctors, to have scientists, people who are stay there for a research project. It's already a target that it's less likely to be there to occupy your property. And also, it is, remember, someone who doesn't have their permanent address in the property, which means that at some point they will go back home, and it is extremely unlikely that you end up with an illegal occupant in your property. Personally, I have been doing with a partner agency that is specialized in all the forms of rental in Barcelona, medium-term rental for my international clients for 13 years, and none of them has ever had any problem with someone not paying the rent or staying in the property without paying. Also, for medium-term rental, it's easier to get an insurance. You must have an insurance on the property, the normal insurance that covers damages or possible problems. But you can also have an insurance that covers the risk of the tenant not paying the rent, which means that if someone stops paying, by the time they leave, insurance pays the rent on their behalf. So it's a much more flexible, it's much safer, and it's much more profitable. That's why this is the form of rental that, together with tourist rental, I always recommend to my clients. What are, on the other hand, the disadvantages of medium-term rental? Very few. The fact that you have a higher turnover of tenants, which can be an advantage, but sometimes also a disadvantage. If you have a very good tenant, maybe they just stay for 6 months and then arrives someone else. So the property, the wear and tear can be also a bit higher. The fact that there are higher costs involved. The property must be fully furnished and equipped. So everything that someone needs to live in the property must be already there. The only thing usually that the tenants take with them is the personal effects and the bed linen, the towels, personal things, but all the rest must be in the property, including all the plates, cutlery, electronic appliances, internet, everything must be ready. And this, of course, it's a higher cost, but it's also a cost that you have to invest in once at the beginning of the tenancy. You have the cost of the agency, which is higher than long-term rental, but on the other hand, the profitability is so much higher that even if you have these costs, it's still much more worth it compared to long-term rental. So now, talking about profitability, how much can you expect as an ROI from the medium-term rental? First of all, on average, consider that rental in Spain in 2023 was given on average an ROI of 7.1% gross, What does it mean? That if we consider that these are percentages of long-term rental and medium-term rental is higher, the ROI that you can expect from medium-term rental is increasing more and more. On average, it can be between 6 and 8%, but in some areas, depending also on how much you pay initially for the property, it can be higher. There are places on the Costa del Sol, I know people who bought new development properties in the early stages where the price was lower in the early stages of the project, and they are making even 9 or almost 10% gross with medium-term rental. So it's a very safe and very profitable form of rental, of course, depending on the property, how you set up the property and the rental, and of course the location. So to sum up, medium-term rental is one of the best form of investments that you can choose together with tourist rental. We will talk about tourist rental in the next video, so subscribe and you will be notified when the video comes out. For now, I thank you very much for spending time with me. I hope you found the video interesting. If you did, please like the video. It means a lot. It helps the channel. And if you need help in your investment, contact me because we can work together to make your property purchase and medium-term rental investment very safe and very profitable. Thank you for watching, and I will see you very soon. Take care.